Good evening, all of you. My name is Sangeetha, and I have my colleagues and friends to my left. Sudarshan Iyengar from IIT Ropur. He is a computer scientist and an expert in artificial intelligence. Narayanan is from IIT Mumbai. He works on water governance, and one of his interests includes political ecology. Tilak Agerwala spent 36 years with IBM. He is interested in artificial intelligence and ethics. Saurabh Todariya has a PhD in philosophy. His expertise is also in comparative studies of Western philosophy, Indian philosophy, and particularly phenomenology. My own interest is philosophy, psychology, and the purpose of philosophy. The forum which is organizing this evening's program is called the Evening Philosophy Chat, which is a forum presented by the NIAS Consciousness Studies Programme. The idea of the forum is to contextualize larger questions that baffle our mind, our existence, and our societal existence with the help of a larger philosophy that asks the purpose of doing and how we do it, why we do in such a manner. If you look at the evolutionary history of the human species, whether it is cultural history or the biological evolutionary history, you can see that we started by connecting with things around us. We started connecting with environment near us, around us, with us. And when we say we start connecting with an environment around us, we have to keep in mind that our primary relation is with the unknown. And our constant pursuit is to be in touch with the unknown, to connect with the unknown. How do we connect with the unknown? Or what is the final outcome of connecting with the unknown? How do we connect with the unknown is by framing a piece of knowledge of the relation between yourself and the entity or the entities with which you are trying to connect. And the outcome is some sort of negotiation, how you and the entity with which you are connected coexist. So if you would see the evolution of human history, what I just said was always captured by the enterprise of philosophy. Philosophy is an inquiry into the unknown by continuously creating known relationships, known purposes. So, purpose is making the unknown known in a certain manner. I don't intend to give an abstract philosophy lecture, and you will soon be sleeping, which I wouldn't do. My intent is to bring to your attention that philosophy is the grand enterprise of not just critiquing, but creating relationships. And in order to create relationship, you have to continuously understand how we form knowledge and what exactly is knowledge. We have to also remember that as academics, as lay people, as students, as people who are engaged in very many different responsibilities, we have tossed between two dominant forces in the history of knowledge. One of this force is called as the force of rational thinking, which is to always discover objectivity in what is called as a nebulous existence. So rationality is by which we create very contextualized, limited possibilities for us to engage with the unknown. when the early Greek philosophers and the Upanishadic thinkers were on the street meeting with people, their whole purpose was to bring in the unknown to the masses and connect that unknown with the masses. And why did they do that? They only wanted one thing. They wanted to create what is called as wonder, to awe. In fact, philosophy is based on the primary structures to wonder, to have your mouth open and look up or look down and perhaps capture the moment in which you are in all its magnanimity. So the ability to wonder, in fact, embraces both the rational process and what is called as the experiential realm, which involves not only just the rational process, but to connect with people in much richer forms and much complex ways. Today's topic is to bring to you one of the most exciting, I wouldn't say problem, but one of the most exciting possibility that is confronting us. The possibility is the transcendence of human identity from a single agent-based system to a networked-based existence. And I have literally kind of taken this idea from the inspiration from movies such as Transcendence, which was, the whole project was to transport or transfer what is called as the mind of a single person to a network. Therefore, maximize all that potency this mind had enclosed in a human body. Would he behave differently when he is transferred to a network? There are 2 or 3 movies which we should definitely see in order to even think about these problems, because science fiction movies bring us the ability to think without any agenda before thinking, because to think freely you need to have a free mind. Mortality, frailty of experience, these are the 2 phenomena which are confronting perhaps what we call as the crux between artificial intelligence and the simple ways of living and human existence. How do we negotiate between the frail experiences which we have day in and day out, which makes you and me the rich person we are, yet to use tools and maximize the joy or the way we connect with people in manifold? Philosophy started with connecting with the unknown. Today we are confronted with the same problem of having to connect with the unknown. But in this process, I think we have also come to a very, a very subtle stage where we get an opportunity to reflect upon our identities. Are we talking about a replacement of the human identity, which is characterized by frailty of experience, the mistakes which we make, and only the relative realm of knowledge which we operate with? So how do we negotiate with experience that is frail, that which is leading always to unknown, to more certainty, and perhaps more possibilities? So you would see on one side that you still have a higher purpose in front of you that gives you an ability to reflect upon your identity, which is based on an agency. If we give up that agency, which is a minimalist definition to be a self, to a system which is sitting outside you, what would be your role as individual who is characterized by the frailty of his experience. So friends, what we want to today discuss is negotiating between two powerful forces. And these two powerful forces are the force of the frail human mind and the strong artificial intelligence. May I request Sudarshan to perhaps respond to some of these questions and challenges which is faced by the very exciting upcoming field of artificial intelligence, collective intelligence. Sudarshan.
So if we look at the analogy of, let's say, rising a building, it involves a good foundation. It is not just a foundation, it involves the tuning of the foundation, which should be the right time, and then go ahead building the wall. Then give it more time, and then go ahead building the roof. Then continue to cure it. So there's a process through which a building is built. So is knowledge in particular, right? So knowledge also should go progressively, slowly, and it should not be rushed, right? So when you look at this AI as a field, it started off some 60 years ago where someone was trying to toy around with the idea of trying to mimic human brain. Can we sort of program intelligence? We are able to program the computer to put the numbers in order. There is some sort of intelligence going on in the background. Can we try to mimic human intelligence? Right? Several years ago, people tried asking the same question about, see a bird, try to mimic it. Okay? And then they thought flapping the wings is the right technology. Then they realized it doesn't work. The wings that we have of the aeroplane today, they don't flap. Okay? There are propellers. The technology is completely different. Right? So let's ape something that is observed in nature. Humans are intelligent. Let's try to mimic that intelligence. But at the same time, let's be cautious that it needn't necessarily be the way humans think. So there were several ways of seeing if intelligence can be artificially synthesized. Okay? One such way was the typical logical deductions, right? P implies Q, Q implies R, P implies R, right? Can we use some such thing to embed into a system which thinks like humans? They tried that, they failed. They tried looking at the neuron, and then there was some advancement in the neuroscience field. So neuron can be mimicked. They tried, and then they failed. But as they say, there's something called autopoiesis. Knowledge happens. You know, one should take a very non-goal oriented walk, and knowledge comes to you. This is something that happened to AI in 2012. The model that was created long back called the neural network. Okay. Parallelly, there was something called the gamers technology coming up. They realized that the typical CPU is not enough. We need something called the GPU. Okay. So everything came together, and in 2012 they realized that these GPUs that were used in gaming world today can be used to realize our neural network in a very large scale. And they tried observing that there is this typical norm in computer science. If something beats a human being, then we have surpassed that. You know, that's like a benchmark. That's like a milestone. They observed that computers can play better than Kasparov. Oh, wow, that's a milestone. In 2012, they realized that computer can recognize images better than humans. That's a huge milestone. And lately, this year, as I'm talking, if someone records my voice and then tries running a small network on it, one can reconstruct my face. Right? This is called voice to image. It sounds like hocus pocus, but this is today possible. The logic behind is very simple. It observes many people's different voice tones and looks at the fact that this person talking is a combination of this person, and this person. His image should also be a combination of this person, and this person. It tries to put the eyes of that person, nose of this person, forehead of this person, creates a new person. Right? This seems very straightforward a logic which one can explain to a second grade kid. But then it took so much time. It took 60 years for people to say this sci-fi idea is today realizable. As we realize this, accompanying this is the huge hype that came with AI. We tend to put everything in a box with a magnifying glass, saying, oh, if it's an ant, we can probably make it appear like an elephant. So they tried doing with AI mainly because of funding. They were very successful. At the same time, when they said that we will now develop a driverless car and go to Mars and take a turn to Venus and then go to Moon and then come back to Earth, it appeared so much of a hype. Because of which sort of AI has underwent what is called AI winters, hype cycles. It has gone up, come down, gone up, come down. So relating to what Sangeetha was saying, knowledge should progress very slowly, and one should look at it with a very holistic perspective. And what is missing in AI today is that holistic perspective. People look at AI as this will solve our problems. They're not looking at it as a subject in its own, I mean, self-contained subject. Once we start looking at it, probably we can expedite the process. Ethics has become a very big issue in AI simply because in the past 60 years, we never realized what if AI becomes a reality, what will be the ethics part. Isaac Asimov realized this long back in his sci-fi work and said, if there is a machine which has superintelligence, artificial intelligence, it should be like this, this, this. But that remained in sci-fi, it didn't come to sci part of the knowledge. So the call here is to take a very holistic approach about AI and try to see what are its ramifications and take a very fundamental approach to study what is intelligence. We require institutes to get together probably and ask this question, what exactly is intelligence without maybe an end result of creating a driverless car or pilotless jets.
So I want to first thank Professor Menon for organizing such an interesting panel and for actually inviting me, a non-philosopher, to participate in this panel of real experts in the domain that we are talking about. And so I'm going to start, and a lot of what I'll say is probably consistent with what Professor Sudarshan just said, and I'll try to do this fairly quickly. But there's a huge problem with definitions in this field of artificial intelligence. So I just want to make clear at least what I am speaking of and give you a quick overview of the landscape of AI, and then I'll tell you what my point of view is. So, you know, people talk about superintelligence today, but before we get to that, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is generally defined as the non-biological ability to accomplish complex tasks, right? And of course, one may say that human beings really do much more than just solve complex tasks. So that's the first point that Professor Menon actually makes. Now, artificial superintelligence is where the computer or the machine greatly exceeds the cognitive performance of humans in virtually every environment. Artificial general intelligence is the ability to accomplish any cognitive task as well as humans. Now, I have to say that this as well as humans is what creates some of the complexity, because to me, that implies if you're going to do it as well as humans, then it brings in emotional intelligence and it also brings in self-awareness. Artificial narrow intelligence is the ability to accomplish a narrow set of tasks, and machine learning is where all the action is today. Machine learning can be supervised or unsupervised. We won't go into that detail, but this is a class of machines that can learn by example as opposed to being programmed. And then deep learning is where really most of the action is. And in deep learning, computers are able to discover the intricate structure in large data sets. Okay. Now, superintelligence may happen in decades, it may happen in centuries, or it may never happen. AI experts disagree on this point, and we simply do not know. Artificial general intelligence, there's absolutely no indication that we are anywhere near AGI. And most of the examples today are narrow AI and involve deep learning, as I said. And this is really advanced math and statistics. There's no magic over here. This is advanced math and statistics. Just to add to what Professor Sudarshan said, given where I'm coming from, I see that it's really the availability of very, very high performance, cost-effective computing and communications that is driving much of this activity, right? So in that sense, it's somewhat mechanical, right? It's math, statistics, and computing. These machines can be, this software, it's mainly software. This software can either be embedded, in which case we call it a robot, or it can just be running in a virtual environment, in which case we call it a bot. And with this level of capability, you're able to accomplish some fairly significant tasks. So this is a very 3-4 minute overview of what AI is and what I see the current landscape as. If you ask me personally, I don't think we are anywhere close to, perhaps we will never get to conscious machines, but that is my opinion. All right, we don't need the slides anymore. I'd like to point out also that historically there have been two approaches to artificial intelligence. They're both based on the same sorts of technologies, but there are really two approaches. This started, as Professor Sudarshan said, in the early 60s. John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence, and he basically decided to ape human intelligence, and he started doing a series of experiments at the same time. He was at Stanford, and at the same time in Stanford there was Professor Engelbart, and his thesis was a little different. His thesis was that computers we should try to make computers help human beings, increase their intelligence, augment their intelligence, and he actually published a conceptual framework. Now, this dichotomy actually exists today, and it's very, very prevalent. Even in self-driving cars, Google wants to build driverless cars. Other people want to build cars that have mechanisms that assist the driver and make the driving experience more important. All right, so let me get to my position very, very quickly. There's ample evidence that progress in AI is going to continue globally at an exponential pace. There's just no doubt in my mind on that. Because it's critical to economic competitiveness, it's critical to national security, and actually there are many, many business opportunities and applications as well. In that sense, I would say that our focus should be on individual and collective intelligence augmentation, not in terms of replacing communities or replacing individuals. Now, I believe that we will actually see many, many benefits in healthcare and social justice, in lifelong learning, in public safety and security, and for many of you scientists and engineers in the room, AI is actually going to significantly accelerate scientific discovery as well. The technology will have its failures, it will be misused, and it will raise ethical issues. I think we have to recognize this. Even so, I do not believe that we should put the brakes on the technology. Philosophically, it goes against the liberating effect that producing knowledge actually has. But in a more practical sense, it's kind of not possible because of the commoditization. Algorithms are getting commoditized, values moving more to the data than to the algorithms, and even robotics is getting commoditized. So what should we do? I think we need to continue unbiased R&D in all of the categories of AI described earlier. Now, given where I'm coming from, I believe that we should, yes, we should do the first principles basis of sort of understanding knowledge and how it's created. But as a systems person, I also believe that in addition to that, you've got to really start building and experimenting in the community. Now, you have to do that. You have to understand the impacts of the technology while you're doing that, and you have to communicate those impacts. And for that, you actually need psychologists, sociologists, ethicists, a whole bunch of different domains to be involved in that part of the exercise. And then very important, those of us who are actually going to be involved in the design of these machines that we're going to start bringing into the marketplace, we need to pursue ethical design approaches. And this is an area that we cannot ignore. It's actually getting mandated by professional societies and by governments and organizations. Now, underneath all this, then, I feel that we have to really address this point where there's going to be an upside, there's going to be a downside, there's going to be a significant upside. I think we've got to start educating the population on how to have critical thinking skills. I think this is very, very important because without those critical thinking skills, you can't do the next step, which is raise awareness in the population about ethical issues. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Professor Menon, for the opportunity. I'm not a philosopher, as he also kind of mentioned. I think I come from the technology and development background, and that's also a kind of emerging area that, we are kind of working on. It's not a new area, but, there's a lot of discussions on that. So it's not technology development, it's technology and development. So what is technology doing to society? And what is the technology-society relationship? I think, so I won't be talking about what I don't know, that is AI. I'll be talking about the kind of larger, debate on technology and the relationship between society. So development then has to be kind of unpacked. So development in the conventional sense was growth. And then technology was a very kind of positive factor of techno-economic growth. So disciplines like engineering, management, it actually kind of, took it as it's a kind of positive step for them. But then there were critical streams of thinking about technology also. It's not to be a Luddite, but how are you going to be reflective about technology is the question. So I'm going to show you a small clip, which is actually after the golden age of capitalism, we had the depression in the 1930s. And this is Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times.
Section 5, give it the limit.
this is basically a kind of philosophical question also, in a way. I think in 1844, Marx wrote about alienation as a concept. And this is actually kind of 70 years after that. This was kind of really portrayed of, what could be alienation of the human being from the kind of machines that, has been produced. So there are actually kind of 4 concepts in that. One is this alienation from the product, because since the workers doesn't have the kind of, wherewithal to kind of buy these, design these products or, have control over the production. I think, so that's one of the major things where labor is kind of bought and the use value of the product into a commodity and an exchange value. I think, that's the first thing. Second is alienation from the self, alienation from the member of a human species, robbed from everything that separates the human being from the animal, So that's the kind of, so how much control he has on over his life. This is an exaggerated, I kind of admit that it's an exaggerated one, but it's also a philosophical view to look at that. Then third is alienation of the worker from the human essence, because a person has plurality of interests. And what does, capitalism as a system put workers into was the third question. And the fourth question was, how do they see their relation with other workers? And, how it becomes a competitive one, and, who gets thrown out, and, so then the point was that, there was a need for a kind of social mobilization, I think that was the kind of, so this actually kind of led to workers' organization, trade unions, those kinds of aspects also to balance the kind of techno-economic efficiency that was brought by the system. We come to Forties, there was a big debate within the Congress Working Committee whether which road to take. Is it the kind of Gram Swaraj road or is it the kind of industrial road to take? And then most of the Fabian socialists like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose wanted to kind of say that we can't kind of miss the world, we can't miss the best, and we have to be with the world. And there Kumarappa and Gandhi failed, in the economic paradigm that was actually developed by India. It was industrialize and perish for Gandhi, whereas the world was selling industrialize or perish. So this was also, I'm not taking a side in the debate, I'm taking about it was also a technology debate which was very, very interesting. And then there was this German economist, E.F. Schumacher, which many of you know, who has written The Small is Beautiful. He was also a Gandhian, and he actually has argued that man's current pursuit of profit and progress, which promotes giant organization and increases specialization, has resulted in gross economic inefficiency, environmental pollution, inhuman working conditions. So he proposed something called an intermediate technology. So can we think about, in a labor surplus economy, what could be the kind of, what is the technology that is needed in a labor surplus economy? So that was the question that was asked. I know that these are all very unfashionable, old, but I think, maybe we are in a reflective, stage of our evolution to this kind of efficiency, that these old questions may be interesting to kind of look at. So he says the technology of mass production is inherently violent, ecologically damaging, self-defeating in terms of non-renewable resources, stultifying for the human person, and the technology of production by the masses, making use of the best modern knowledge and experience, is conducive to decentralization, compatible to the laws of ecology, gentle in its use of scarce resources, and intermediate technology is technology with a human face, one that is viable, integrates the human being with his skillful hands, creative brains into a productive process. So I think this was 1972. And I think we have again progressed in all these ways, growth, social marginalization, environmental degradation, all this we actually kind of only progressed. And one of the, Economic and Political Weekly is one of the most kind of, widely read and most popular social science journals. So the last issue, November 9th, there is a article written by K.P. Kannan and Ravindran, who are actually kind of very senior economists, they looked at the National Sample Survey data and looked at employment. So one of the findings is that, after 1950s, this is the lowest point of, kind of worker absorption into the economy, workers. And the job losses are basically happening in agriculture and manufacturing, where there was a job loss of something like 30.54 million in agriculture alone. And then they looked at the gainers and losers in jobs. And most of the job losers are rural women and rural men also. And then the gains in employment are actually happening in the urban sector, and with highly educated kind of people are getting jobs. So the Shining India is a very small portion, and then they calculate the number of, even without the workers that come with a secondary education, 2/3 of women are below secondary levels of education and half of men. So that's the kind of demographic educational profile that we have. So they say that the first factor is the education, second factor is gender, where women are not getting, and third factor is location, where there are rural jobs are kind of, getting lost also. So I think, we have to see India's transition into the kinds of, when we talk about technology transitions, I think we have to see India's transitions also in this kind of a framework. So efficiency is okay, technological efficiency is okay, but I think I'm not talking about artificial intelligence alone. I'm talking about a technology choice that is there. I work in a rice growing region for the last 20 years. So 1997 when I was working there, labor was a very kind of powerful, trade unions were there, and they were not, they could actually at that time negotiate mechanization. 2008 onwards, there is a complete, combine harvester is doing the harvesting. And 1/6 of the produce was, was given for the labor at that time. And these are landless labor. You can always say that farmers also need subsistence and all, but this is, now it's zero. So one of the, one of the major arguments is that, you can't kind of critique technology. You'll have to recalibrate your social structure. But our social structure is this, how are you going to recalibrate it to kind of absorb what levels of technology is one question we can ask. And the last point is, we have all studied projectile, the ethics of technology basically. The projectile I think 7th standard is what I studied. We say that, the projectile is fired at a certain angle and where will it fall? But we never asked the question, who fired it? Why did we fire it? Where did it fall? And who got affected? I think, those are also questions that we should ask when we talk about artificial intelligence. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And philosophy as a way of, bringing together multiple viewpoints and still giving your grand perspective. So may I request philosopher Saurabh, Dr. Saurabh, to make his observations.
So first of all, I would like to thank Professor Sangeetha Menon to make me the part of this wonderful panel. So I would start with the notion of fragility, which Professor Menon talked of, that whether this fragility should be replaced through the strong notion of the artificial intelligence, or this fragility makes us more human, or it makes the human intelligence unique. So let us start with a very fragile experience. What does it mean to expect someone? So Wittgenstein in philosophical investigation, he gives this example that what does it mean to expect someone? Is there a single property which will define, okay, that expectation mean? So he says, suppose if I am expecting someone from 4 to 4:30, so is there a particular state of mind or is the set of the different activities which will define, okay, that I'm expecting. So he gives the example, suppose that I prepare the tea for 2, I think for a moment, does B smoke and put out cigarette. Towards 4:30, I begin to feel impatient. I imagine B as he will look into when he comes into my room. So all this called expecting B from 4:30. But for the different people, the different expectations would be required. There cannot be a, he says, the single thing which will define, okay, this is the expectation means. So he gives a very interesting, not a definition, kind of define expecting. He says it might be the case that the strain or the tension which is produced in my body and mind, it gets relaxed when I see the bee coming. So he says it might be the definition of expectation. Now, just think the way the scientist is expecting the solution of some outcome of his research, or poet is thinking of the when he is creating the poetry. So lot of anxiety, crisis, and everything is involved in that. Can machine expect the solution in that way, the way the humans expect? So this is what brings us to the phenomenological notion of human, the way human lives in the world, experience the world. So on artificial intelligence, one of the major important philosopher who worked in this area and wrote a lot about it is Hubert Dreyfus, who was in MIT. So he says that basically artificial intelligence works in the paradigm that all the human behavior and actions can be modeled in the formal logic. So that can be reduced into a certain logical symbols, and through the manipulation of these symbols, that the robots or the machine can imitate the human behavior. He says that this is fundamentally this is the fundamental assumption, but it does not see that in philosophy we distinguish between the two capacities which humans have. One is difference between the knowing that and knowing how. So knowing that are the activities which require the formal rules, procedures, but there are the other activities which involve the knowing how. So these are like the activities like climbing into the mountains, dancing, swimming, and other kinds of the play and all that. So these are the knowing how activities. So Dreyfus calls it as the skillful coping. So he says that when we cope up with the world, so what happens? We are in a flow. So he says when we are in the flow, at that time we don't require the explicit rules or kind of the logical symbols in order to operate in the world. So that coping is developed in us, and this helps us to engage with the world. So in fact, when the dancer who is dancing, at that time to think about the rule, to use the rule very formally, it will the hindrance in the coping. So rather what happens, it is a flow. So that has been, so our fundamental engagement with the world is a non-conceptual. It is not the conceptual through and through. So finally, so this approach is basically what Dreyfus called the phenomenological in nature. So phenomenological experience is like that when I enter into this room, so the chair is not an object to be seen. It is rather the object to be used. And it is already there is a context there that I need to sit in the chair in order to speak so that I can make sense. So already humans are embedded in a context. Only in that context, the things make sense to us. When the things doesn't work, he gives the example of Heidegger's example of the hammer, that when the something doesn't work, and then I'm not able to go through with that, do I work with that, then it becomes the object of the theoretical reflection for me. So therefore, Dreyfus' point is that fundamentally humans has the different set of the skills between the knowing that and the knowing how, and the way the artificial intelligence is modeled, it's more on the symbolic rules and which is in the knowing that, and that is why it is from the point of view of phenomenology that it is a kind of the inflated claim that the technological singularity can come or one can upload one's mind into some system. So that is what Professor Sudarshan was also saying, that in this realm of the knowledge, we need to move slow. So we need to actually, first of all, look at what the intelligence is, rather than then we can understand better.
Thank you all. Perhaps we'll open it to the audience for questions, but before that, maybe we will have a little chat between the people who are sitting on this side, so that perhaps you would also have a different way of creating a perspective on this whole issue. A couple of strong points which we made about not so strong human experience, or not so strong belief in the possibility of human experience. One of this, I think, what Professor Sudarshan said, that creating benchmarks which go beyond the limit of human excellence. So, for example, let's say the computing power or similar possibilities. And you also, Professor Tilak, you doubted the possibility of conscious machines. Perhaps also, according to you, ethical frameworks will have to be there, awareness will have to be created so that people can make choices. And I think Professor Narayanan gave a different viewpoint altogether, looking at the force of alienation in the context of technology and development and the mad rush we are doing. And it's very interesting that Dr. Saurabh brought in the importance of frail experiences and creating a narrative which is not so frail but very strong, and which is perhaps going to be a larger superstructure to embed those frail experiences, which means the frailty of human experience is actually pointing to something which is much stronger in terms of human agency, human identity, and the continual evolution of conscious participation in otherwise a world which is perhaps devoid of human participation. I mean, you took in the example of chair and so on. So, well, I just wanted to make this little summary so that we can come back to the questions. I think here the question is, I think almost all of us perhaps believe that there may have to be a halt, if not a stop, or at least a reflection. So one of the question is, if we know that there has to be a reflection, what is that which is stopping us in the modality which we are using itself? So it's kind of, you run very fast, then you stop at a point, and then you think, oh no, I should not be running so fast, let me slow down. Again you run, and then again you stop down. So why such an afterthought? Why can't a pre-thought of reflection, whether it is be ethics or whether it's a discourse on how disillusionment is produced, or how the contextualization of human experiences has to be seen, is not considered before you create something which you think is creating more alienation, more dehumanization? Or my last question is, are we looking at the humanization of technology, or bringing back something which has taken away the essence of being a human?
You're right, if I can give my share of the answer. So you're right that we are going fast. The humanization part is very important. To illustrate why this is so, as an example, if I ask you to open your Gmail, you will say, why do you want to look into my inbox, right? An obvious answer will be that. If I say, fine, don't open Gmail, but open youtube.com, you will say, fine, what will he get to know when I open youtube.com? But the moment you open youtube.com, I see your recommendations, and I can sort of infer what kind of videos you watch. So that's sort of breach of privacy. This was never realized when people came out with what is called the recommender systems. Today they are realizing that a facility can backfire. Okay, they never paused and thought that, so there is a human sitting on the other side, we should probably realize that part. My second example is, if you see, let's say if you buy a product on Amazon, it says customers who bought this also bought this. You buy a spoon, it says fork might also be useful for you. As long as it is between spoon and fork, it is good. But then if I want to buy a 7th standard textbook of English to my son, 8th standard textbook should not be a recommendation, but it can be a recommendation after 1 year, right? Amazon also does this. It gives you recommendation of 7th standard science textbook when you buy English textbook, but after 1 year it will recommend 8th standard textbooks. So far so good. But what happened some one and a half decades back is a teenager bought pregnancy test kit. Okay, after 7 months, Amazon recommends, look at these diapers. Okay, sends free diapers to the teenage girl, and the dad was pretty annoyed, and he tried suing Amazon. Amazon says, no, we just embedded this algorithm of if someone buys X after time T, he or she will be interested to buy Y. Machine did that, we didn't do it. So machine was unfair there. There comes the idea of fairness and ethics from the machine side. So whom do you sue right now? I'm reminded of, oh my God, movie where the person goes suing the God, saying that it was an act of God, I must sue the God. Similarly, how do you sue the machine? Then they realize that, oh, we have constructed the walls really fast without windows. And the window here is the ethics part. We have never looked into it. So going fast without humanizing the technology can be very dangerous. It's so fast right now that we don't know the repercussions of the technological advancement. Yeah.
Anybody else would like to comment?
I think, one way of alienation is, if you travel in, a flight or if you sit in any waiting room, all of us are watching our mobile phones. And then I think that is a way of nucleation that's happening, and which is actually kind of happened much earlier in the West, the kind of nucleation or atomization of the individual is one. And then each of your like in your Facebook or each of your comments, these are all data points. So during your leisure, you are actually a labor. And that is the most alienating, because you don't know what your labor is actually kind of, getting into. So I think, these are actually interesting dimensions of the alienation that we are in. And to your question, your question of, why this is not getting stopped is because I think simple capitalism can't survive without big accumulation, and it has to restructure itself constantly. There is a lot of competition and uncertainty there. So I think it has to be super efficient. So I think that if you are between efficiency and kind of justice or distribution or something, the second one doesn't have much space now, the way it's moving. And that's why, our collective mobilization things are also gone, trade unions are all gone. And, and why is kind of politics also changing like that? Certain types of governments coming all over the world is also kind of reflection of this restructuring, which is actually kind of, helping this accumulation process possible. So I don't think it's stoppable unless there is some very big change happening.
Yeah, it looks like we move from kind of a huge expectation of technology being a force for liberating us from, lesser comfort to more comfort and using better tools for better expression. But it's very interesting that the very same technology is using a lot of human interfaces, like, what you said and what you said, but finally is leading to more and more, perhaps better kind of disillusionment. I find it's very ironic that the whole purpose of technology is kind of defeated, that it's not creating better comfort, but perhaps better ways of addressing your own disillusionment. So we are kind of almost moving to a dystopia kind of situation where you have to progress in order to continuously address your fatalistic existence of disillusionment, in disillusionment.
Maybe I didn't fully get the point, but I would like to say the following, that that in these emerging technologies, where you've got sort of a very, very steep exponential curve, as hard as you try, you may not be able to predict all of the outcomes. And even those people who are doing this thoughtfully they who are sort of developing AI solutions thoughtfully, and as I said, now there's this big emphasis on designs that are really user-centric, that follow the right kinds of ethics throughout the whole process. There's only so much progress that you can make by just deliberating. I may say that consciousness is not possible, but there's really no way to determine that, I think, without a certain amount of incrementalism. So you've got to sort of interact with the marketplace. You've got to put products out there which are ethically designed, and then you've got to see what the real outcomes are. And that requires a very collaborative effort between technologists and social scientists and psychologists and the like. So I'm not sure that people are not reflecting. I think people are reflecting, but the nature of the problem, by definition almost, you can't predict the outcomes. And therefore, one of the things I think you have to do is you have to take a certain amount of risk. You have to continue to develop the technologies, and you have to try to gain knowledge by, in some sense, interacting with the marketplace, which I think is a valid form of gaining new knowledge.
Just I want to underscore the relationship between self and the ethics. So self is actually formed by the interaction we have with the people around us. So ethics cannot, so as you rightly mentioned, that ethics cannot be a manual that we can apply in every situation, but it is generated through our embodied empathetic relationship with the others. So we need to see that how more we are spending time with the virtual world and technology, how our reduction in our relationship, embodied and the empathetic relationship with the other, it is also blunting the sense of ethics and the sense of empathizing with the other. So this is the point.
I think we have raised enough questions and issues, and including people who are sitting here and on the other side, we are the end users, right? So I think we have enough reflection being forced consumers, or perhaps very consciously consciously chosen, choosing consumers. So I'm sure we would have several anxieties and perhaps several concerns, or even hopes about the future which is approaching. So the floor is open for not just for your questions, but also perhaps for your comments. But may I request to make them brief so that we all can participate.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. And it's, you read about AI and its interaction with society and the debates on ethics. It's always sort of either a capitalist dystopia or a socialist utopia. And that's the, the entire terrain that is, and there's nothing in the middle. And so I want to specifically ask the NC, since you talked about capitalism and alienation. And, in this entire discussion, the system of economic production and the relations of production that characterize it, and the fetters that they then create for growth of human society, in something like feudalism created its own fetters, and so does capitalism. And in that sense, those seem to be, at any given point of time, even now, with the very rapid development of AI, much faster movers or drivers of economic change and social change than technology itself, right? And they create, so the emancipatory potential of technology is also created by the system in which it is produced. And so if that system is a fetter for human well-being, that system has to be transcended. And that becomes a bigger prime mover than AI or machine learning or technology in itself. And that seems to be missing in this discussion. So where do you fit that in the...
Just the way Hegel says that history needs to be interpreted as the evolution of ideas. So at every historical epoch, we need some ideas which go beyond the normal ones. And so Hegel says, and mostly in Indian philosophy also, every history should be at a higher level of egoistic transcendence. So here, I think for the first time, we have come to a situation in which embodied existence, which is the root cause of all ego and all problems, and the downside of ethics, could be to a large extent transcended by the use of technologies. But again, I don't understand why we are so skeptic about it. I see that if we do a deconstruction of humanity, what humanity we understand, that is full of ethical inconsistency and contradictions. Humanity means racism, patriarchy, colonialism, and all the different kinds of speciesism, and all the different things that do not make us amazing beings. But suddenly, when it comes to having a possibility in which we could have a, say, super species which is more intelligent, suddenly we fear and we say that maybe we should stop it. This is like the height of human insecurity. Of course, all our religions, morality is based on insecurity, but now for the first time, I guess, we have a situation in which we could create intelligent beings which could better rule us. So normally when we have insecurity, what we do? We go to a god and we just put our hopes to it, hoping that the god will do it. But for the first time, we have the possibility of a god which would actually perform. And so why not give it a try? Of course, it would lead to a lot of changes, but the very values that humanity stands on is very hollow. It is full of ignorance. Why not transcend it?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sabina, and I work in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I am kind of in this initial phase of exploring a PhD, and possibly with Professor Menon, so I'm here. So this is from my own experience, my own self-reflection on what I do with my life and how I use technology, because I am seeped in a very capitalist economy. I get this whole adrenaline rush with every innovation I see, etc., etc. At the same time, I'm a deep nature lover, and I oscillate between wanting to run away from this world and then wanting to be embedded in it completely. So I kind of operate at both these. And I guess for me, I seem to realize that, technology and the pursuit of technology and the pursuit of something bigger and even better than us might always stand, because that is at the very quest of what also makes us human, just as in much the quest for the unknown, but also, the quest for proving in some way or using our own creative force. And technology, starting from fire, and now maybe we have IT, it's all technology, it's all an output of that. I'm also referring to the question that popped up about what is intelligence, and what you mentioned just now. I wouldn't worry so much about a more super intelligent being created, because even while we will need to pause and reflect, and while the people on the supposedly the better side, the good side, the conscious side will always step in and do that for the larger benefit of humanity, you cannot avoid the other side, where there will be people who will always want to milk and exploit the technology, because that is also part of human nature. We have both the opposing, so that will continue, I feel, as far as the world exists. So there will be always people who will pause and reflect, and there will be always people who will want to create the super intelligent. And if we are already thinking of exploring places like Mars, then we are already somewhere, kind of consciously enveloping a super intelligent being. Then why not on our own planet? Because there might be species that come in from there. So that's it. So basically my point is that it's all a whole big experiment, this whole idea of being human. So while we need to pause and reflect, I still, I keep coming back to what is intelligence, and why should I fear a more intelligent being? Because probably it will challenge me to be even more human. So, yeah.
I think it's a very important question you have raised, where you have said that whether there could be a guideline for a spectrum of humanness or being a human, and perhaps any outcomes in that process is also maybe perhaps a part of being a human. This is a very, very kind of a controversial issue which you have raised, and who will limit that spectrum with guidelines in the front and at the at the end, which we have to discuss. Other questions? Any other comments? It will be nice to have a one-liner introduction and then have the perhaps I would say a brief question or comment, because then others also can participate.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a PhD scholar from Christ University. So just a small comment. thank you to the panel for a very engaging topic. I mean, I just wanted to bring a reference up about this dystopian future we see a lot in movies, etc. About this technology finally getting over mankind, etc. There's always this, this imagination of movie makers about these humanoid sort of creatures who are outdone humans, etc. So a lot of times, because this rang to me about the humanization of technology, when people imagine it at first, they literally imagined the actual human figure, etc. also, but then we fail to realize that a lot of that has been taking place through just maybe a smartphone alone, Maybe this is the face of the technology that we sort of didn't imagine at first. But then I also want to bring this point up of not just the humanization of technology, but also maybe the technologization of humans as also, Like we talk a lot about how technology might take over. We haven't seen the effect the other side around, how the experience of human living has been enhanced or, progressed by the use of something simple as a smartphone alone, how it sort of becomes this transition object or this extension of yourself, your embeddedness, or your sort of like a working memory of, something external to you sort of thing. So I think this is a discussion that goes two-way around, where when you're thinking about just the humanization of technology, we're also looking at how much our lived experience as humans is being, enmeshed with technologies that we use on a everyday basis, basically, something like a smartphone.
Interesting point, and I cannot help comment on this, that there is a perpetual sensation of fear whenever there is an alien force which comes and takes a seat on the earth. And one of this alien force could be from other planet, and the other could be from technology. And both we fear will take over the species and have their own existence, right? So it's very, very interesting. The second, I think, question which you raised, again, very interesting. Why can't we do the technologization of human experience, which I think we are seeing in a very fast pace, right? The smartphones have more emotions than you have, because you don't know what emotions you have, but the smartphones tell you this is how you should look when this so-called emotion is there, right? You know what I mean, right? So that's already happening. But then the larger question is there, when the smartphones have taken all the emotions you already have and created better and finer or grosser emotions than more than what you have, is there anything left to be human? Any other questions?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this panel. I think most of myself, Ganesh, I'm working as a professor in New Horizon College of Engineering, Bangalore. Most of the technologies which are developed till now, which are being developed by keeping the end in their mind. That is, there are some hiccups or some the plans which are actually went out of the way, but Dr. Sudarshan was actually mentioned. But most of the technologies, particularly in mechanical engineering sector, like the standards which have been brought from BS6 engine about the emission standards, I think they are well in control. But going beyond that may be difficult to develop such engines or such technologies for the humankind. So can we just imagine and develop? If that's the case, where we actually going to be? So that's what I just wanted to mention. It's a simple comment. I think I can expect Sudarshan to mention a few words.
Sure. Thank you all. My name is Sudarshan, and I work here in the education with the education group. I have two quick questions. One is the topic, which is fragile human experience versus strong artificial intelligence, is that an assumption? Because what I heard from the wonderful exposition of Dr. Agerwala was that right now we are very far away from general AI, and also we are looking at narrow AI. So right now, aren't we in a position of strength, being the creators of this relatively young technology? That is one. And the second thing is, Professor Narayan, I just wanted to ask, over history, since you have studied this and you have provided this wonderful perspective, if we were to look back, reflect on a better epoch as a role model for today's society, what that would be?
Philosophers always say something positive by bringing in the negative aspect of it. So we consider the fragility as the greatest strength of human experience, not a shortcoming. Anybody else?
So, hello everyone, I'm Meera. I'm a PhD scholar working under Sangeetha ma'am. So, considering we are taking some time for reflection, I was wondering, does technology then, especially with so much customization happening, does it make us sort of enhance our narcissistic selves by extending our idea of the self, or does it also help us introspect better, because at some point or the other technology is narrating our own stories to ourselves, so we are hearing about ourselves from a different entity. So that was one question. And since we were also discussing about how technology is taking a leap, whereas introspection or say ethical concerns are probably not following up as quickly as one would want it to be, is it also because of our very practical divide between philosophy and say the philosophy and literature and disciplines of that kind, and scientific learning, which is hardly ever in congruence or in conversation with each other like it is now, and maybe we should have more of it, which is probably what we are trying to do and probably what we might require. So that's about it.
Just moving towards perhaps. Yes, Niharika, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, I'm Niharika. I'm a PhD scholar here working under Sangeetha ma'am. I just have one question. I was listening to all the example that Sudarshan sir was giving, even Tilak sir was giving, about how like there's an algorithm where we buy something on Amazon, and it just, after a certain amount of time, it says that, okay, you might need this at this moment. But, and even technology, if you say like Google Calendars, even like apps and everything, where you feed in your data that, oh, I have to do yoga here, or I have to meet this person here. Don't you think some part of our agency is being dominated by AI without us knowing? Or when we say that we are creating the machines to help us, don't you think in our present scenario also it has started dominating? Or like for me, I think I see this perspective. I think I might be wrong. If we say like after 50 years, it may come into a conscious being, or after 100 years, it might be conscious, the machine can't be conscious. But right now also we can see some examples of them ruling over certain aspects of our life. So just a comment. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have just one comment. As a practicing AI engineer, I would heartily agree with Mr. Agerwala that AI is extremely fragile as of now. And I don't know how long it will take to actually become AGI. So that's one thing. But also, I think there's a positive aspect to the hyper domination of AI through business. And that is that I think it will expose human beings to their fragility in a very direct and in a very empowering way. When tomorrow, when even say professors and everybody from laborers to professors are going to be automated out of their jobs, what will we do? I think we have to confront our fragility and really reach out to the highest self that we have, highest power that we have at our disposal, psychological power or spiritual power. So I think we should look at it in a positive way. And finally, I want to ask the panel, and also this being NIAS, what role does education, especially at the 5th grade, 6th grade level, should play in actually bridging the gap between fragile human existence and or disconnected human existence and strong AI as and when it may emerge, which I'm quite skeptical about, but if it does happen. What role should education play? How proactive should we be in our syllabi to actually start bridging this gap in the next generation?
All right, I would think this is the final comment. Anybody else? All right, well, to answer or respond to all the questions, and each one of the panelists is going to be very passionate in responding in greater length, I wouldn't ask the panelists to respond to each of the questions they heard. I'm sorry about that. So may I request the panelists to make perhaps the cumulative reflection on the questions you have heard, and perhaps, privately meet the people, and then you can have lengthy responses. But at this point, just make a cumulative reflection of perhaps some of the points you thought were very important, or just select one. So may I begin with Dr. Saurabh?
So, just on the question, the larger theme which Pratyusha said, that if we think in the Hegelian fashion, so why don't we see the technology as the logical culmination of the historical necessity? So Hegel, when he talks about the moving from the moral community to the ethical, which he called as the Sittlichkeit, so his fundamental point is that we are able to recognize ourselves in the other, in the institutions which are outside us. So the problem with the people in the are raising, like that the technology is basically alienating. So so technology right now is not so much developed that I can mirror all my emotions, all my vulnerabilities in AI. So as Professor Menon said, then if it does that, then you don't know whether it is a human or it is a machine then, if it able to reciprocate each and everything.
So I want to make two very quick comments. One is on the education side. I mentioned it, and I don't know how early this can start, but I think instilling critical thinking skills amongst our younger population, maybe not 5th and 6th grade, but at least at the high school level and definitely at the college level, I think that is fundamental, because they can't even understand the gap that you were talking about unless they have critical thinking skills, and they certainly cannot understand the ethical concepts without having critical thinking skills. So I think that's very, very important. And then I would just very quickly say that, we need to come to this whole AI discussion not from a fear perspective, but from a positive perspective, because there's so many. We tend to talk about the negative examples. Those negative things will happen. But we are the people who are actually building and inventing these technologies. I do not believe in a singularity. And so how these technologies end up being used, and I hope they are used, and there are many examples of they're being used to better human beings. In healthcare, you can find all kinds of examples, that I think we should approach this not from fear, but as scientists and engineers, we should approach this from a perspective that, listen, we can make good things happen. And I strongly believe that as we continue with this development, which is an incremental development, I think we will be able to benefit, we will be able to come to a stage where human beings and machines can solve problems which neither humans nor computers can solve by themselves.
I will basically follow what you're telling about. From this optimism, I think, there is a lot of collective efficiency which is going to increase in a way. The techno-economic efficiency is going to increase. The question that I was asking was, how do we kind of redistribute that is the question. The kind of, inequality that is increasing in the world, and the earlier, that is part of Tejal's question also, and the productive forces are unleashed anyway. How do you, relations of production is what matters. But then state was supposed to mediate this. And the character of the state is also kind of very changing nowadays, So it is very much crony states, it's very friendly with the people who are there, so how do you tax them? How do you redistribute them? I think that's the first major question. Second question that we have not asked is, in this pursuit of accumulation with all these technologies, another major problem is the environmental degradation. Because especially in the third world, resources are more being used in a manner for accumulation. Even Australia, the kind of Chinese growth is dependent on, mining in Australia. So I think, and then the livelihoods that's being lost. So it's not in third world, environmental degradation is not a luxury. It's actually loss of livelihoods, of productive assets, those kinds of things. So I think these are the two major questions which have to be answered. And if I want to have some kind of, thing, more democratization is the only way. I think now corporations rule the world, So how do you make more kind of local level decisions and, and then how can states be kind of empowered also? So it's a dialectical way of, a more better central states and, localized local states, which can then kind of mediate this process.
Yeah, I'll have two quick points. The first one is, should we really keep a watch? Can we just let the technology go free? A couple of you asked this question. If someone says, I want to be a martial artist, we'll say, good, go ahead, practice. Someone says, I want to own a gun, so you better get a license, right? So you can use martial artists, you can be a martial artist to kill someone with a bow staff or a nunchuck. At the same time, you can also be an ordinary person who can use a gun to kill a person. Why not license a nunchuck and a bow staff and a sword, right? So there's an extent up to which you can be be open-minded by saying that this cannot cause any damage, but after a while, probably you will say nuclear bomb, no. A simple bijli cracker, fine, no problem, right? So the AI looks like it is going to an extent where it can lead to breach of privacy by a simple teenager programmer. For example, you give me your Facebook data, right? So one can actually say how many relationships one has had. Now that's really dangerous. That's breach of privacy, and your Facebook profile is vulnerable for that kind of data analysis. Right, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Look at Facebook, and one can even say if these two people are business partners secretly and things like that. So that said, we shouldn't shy away from trying things, but then we should be aware that tomorrow, this can cause dangers, right? And second point, I think we all must sort of wake up here is what AI is hyped as an entire human body, while what it actually is just the fingertip powdering. Right, so it's sort of believed, if you estimate, there's this fun estimate of how many coffees will be consumed before the next invention, how much time will it take for us to invent this. In that fun estimation, if you see, to realize what is called the artificial superintelligence, looks like the human race will be extinct, or some other intelligent being will come up and then find out what is intelligence, but looks like we are really, really far away. What is AI today, to paraphrase, is simply a tall person weighs more than a short person. Statistically speaking, this is actually AI. AI is all about fitting curves and then seeing if we can deduce something. Probably I'm boxing everything into a very simple model, but AI is simply this. But this predicting, coming out with a superhuman intelligence is really, really far-fetched. So we needn't fear. That said, there are certain places where we must really fear. Yeah, thanks.
I would think that Dr. Sudarshan has kind of given a perspective that perhaps our fear or anxieties about, the whole idea of artificial intelligence creating a superintelligence or making the human species extinct has to be really critically viewed. I mean, do we have our facts? Do we have our, arguments in place? And perhaps after that, we should have grand questions. So for example, we may be having very grand questions now, but are they really justified? I think that's a very, very, very important point, perhaps was not covered until now, until you raised it. This forum ends up always with questions, not answers, because if you end up with answers, we will not be able to further, sorry? Yeah. I think that's very, very important. It's because meeting again is a very dear human engagement. Unless you meet, you cannot explore further. Apart from that, I think such complex issues have to have many more questions coming. Because if you have final answers and conclusions, we have almost discovered what is the issue and we have solved it. And I think that is the beginning of a further, much more complex problem. So. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to meeting you again. And this is only a start of the series. We are planning to bring in very, very exciting topics through this forum, and perhaps also a continuation of this very topic for many more evenings. So I thank all of you for being here. Thank you very much, and be well.